Now we are going over to the research part, documentation part. We are also happy to have Mari Sand Austigard here, who works in a company called Mycoteam, and they do research on biological damages on buildings, wooden buildings. And as I guess we will hear about, one of these buildings that in this national research project is actually at Ljönes, one of our old buildings. So welcome to Mari.
So, first, just a comment to Evan. Thank you so much for that lecture on the wind. And because I'm now going to talk about cultural heritage, but I also work with new buildings. And in Bodø, there is not only the wind, it's also the wind-driven rain. And that is a problem for the facades themselves. So if you maybe position the buildings better, then that would be less of a problem. So, yeah, it's just, good thing to say. I'm going to talk about biological degraders, cultural heritage, and climate change, because I work with biological degraders most of the time, and some learning points from the project I'm in. Just a few words about the company I'm in. We're a consultant company doing work within housing damages. This guy, Johan Mattsson, was part of starting the company. Some of you might know him. They started in 1986. We're about 40 now. We have more than 70,000 damage cases in our database. They started with decay and insects and mold, and now it's sort of all sorts of building damages, mostly connected with moisture of some kind. When we have our own laboratory, so we do light microscopy and SEM and qPCR and all sorts of things. We get lots of material samples sent to us and some air samples, and we also go out and take samples ourselves. So we have a lot of experience to use in all sorts of aspects of building damages. So, the biological degraders. I'm thinking that I'm not talking to biologists at the moment, so I think I just have to go a little bit through this. What are the biological degraders in houses? It's bacteria, it's algae, lichens, like this on the statues in the Frogner Park in Oslo. It's fungi, it's insects. This is wasps, just using the surface of the wood for their nests. So you get it's more of a cosmetical damage there. Marine borers, not going to talk about them today. And the degradation that they make is both technical, but it can also be aesthetical. So that the reason for our services might be that people don't like what they see, but it also might be that they can't live in their house or that the house is falling down. So those, it's quite a big spectrum of problems. So I'm mostly going to talk about fungi and insects in this talk here, and also about the technical problems, not so much about the aesthetical things. So this kind of thing then. Mold fungi, this is how it can look like if you have a leakage of hot water throughout the whole vacation. This is decay fungi, the classical picture of wood rotting, and that is always done by fungi. That's an important take-home message. And then wood-boring insects. This is the common furniture beetle, very, very common in especially coastal Norway. So, an extremely quick guide to fungi. Fungi are their own kingdom. They're not plants, they're not animals, they're their own kingdom, fungal kingdom. They are everywhere on Earth, including the Antarctica. Lots of molds in the Antarctica buildings, and in the space stations. They have lots of problems with mold. And they actually have found mold growing outside of the space stations, in space. Fungi use organic materials for metabolism, as we do. So they're net consumers. The plants make the organic materials, we and the fungi eat it. And in the houses, we call damaging fungi that we see in houses. We group things as we see them, because we are a visual species. So we group fungi in mold fungi, which we see as mold, and decay fungi, which we see as decaying wood. And fungi they digest their food outside of their body. We take the food inside and digest it in the stomach. They have to send out their digestion materials, digest the food out there, and then bring it back. That has to happen in water. So the saying that dry wood doesn't rot, that's absolutely true. Because if there is no water, then the fungi can't digest. So this is just the main thing. That's why we work a lot with moisture measurements and moisture considerations. So available water is an absolute necessity for mold growth. And they have temperature preferences. That depends on species. And mostly they prefer the same temperatures as we do. So it's hard to use the temperature to avoid fungal growth. The life cycle is like this. They have spores, little tiny seed things. They germinate, and then you get hyphae, and then you get a mycelium, which is just a large amount of hyphae, and then they sporulate. So the spores are tiny. You can't see one spore, but they are very abundant. We are breathing spores all the time. Fungal spores are around us at all times. And one sporulating dry rot fruiting body gives millions of spores. So the spores, the availability of fungal spores is never what hinders fungal growth. There is always spores available. So if the conditions are right, then the spores will germinate. So it depends on conditions, not on availability of spores. If you have a moldy gypsum plate and you put your finger on it, like that, you will have about 500,000 spores on your finger. That's how tiny they are. So we're always surrounded by them at all times. Mold fungi, they're a surface phenomenon. You see them on the surface of things. In a jam, they might grow inside, but mostly they grow on surfaces. They depend on water activity, which is the relative humidity directly above the surface they are growing on. And directly above, then I mean in spore terms. So that's micrometers. That's really, really directly above. They degrade easily available sugars, starch, cellulose, that sort of thing. They do not degrade wood. They stain wood, but they don't degrade it. They can't tear it down. They can cause discoloration. They may look bad, and they can smell. But the main problem with mold growth is that they are prolific spore producers. They produce a lot and lots and lots of spores. So they produce spores that are tiny, even tinier than the decay fungi. So they can get into your lung systems and your alveoles and they cause respiratory problems. So they make indoor air problems. So they are not a constructional problem as such, but they are a problem for the people using the construction. And there are myriads of mold growth, or mold species, and they are adapted to all sorts of different conditions. Decay fungi are wood specialists, and I'm a wood technologist, so I like them. They like the same things that I do. They degrade wood, they give loss of strength, they give structural damage, and the brown rot, which you see like that, they make kind of square cracks in the wood. They can cause, if you have 5% of weight loss, you will have 50% of loss of elastic strength, so bending strength. So if you only have a little discoloration by a decay fungus, the wood will have lost a lot of its strength. So it's important to consider that. And when you remediate, you have to take a little bit more than what you see in order to be sure that you have removed everything that's lost strength. There are three types, and again, we put them in groups after what we see. So you have white rot, the decay looks white and fibrous. usual in the forest. If you see a branch that's rotten, it's usually fibrous. That's white rots. You have soft rot. The decayed wood looks a little gray, and you can scrape it with your finger. And then you have brown rot, which is the classical housing decay, which looks like that, with square cracks. So this is the most important ones in buildings. There are many species of these as well, but only a handful are common and important in houses. And one of the biggest ones is dry rot, Serpula lacrymans, which is sort of the big scary one. But there are maybe 4 or 5 that we see very, very often. And the wood-boring insects. In Norway, we are quite lucky. We don't have many of them. But for now, these are the most important. It's the house longhorn beetle. That's restricted to southern parts of Norway and then some fjords. So as for now, it's got very small areas. The furniture beetle, it's everywhere, especially in the coastal areas. It needs high relative humidity. And it's important, but it works very slowly. And then the carpet rats. They are not really that much dependent on moisture because they just live in the wood. The first ones, they eat the wood. They digest it. And the ants just live in it. They make their nests in it. And ants like decayed wood, so they often start in a decay damage and then go on into the fresh wood afterwards. So usually, if you find a decay damage, then you probably can get rid of the ants as well. All these have quite specific temperature preferences. The beetles also have moisture preferences. The ants don't have that so much. So when the climate changes, these conditions change, and we are concerned that the areas of the insects or the activity of the insects may increase. So, over to the climate, because all these organisms, as we are, they are very much dependent on their conditions. They like certain conditions to prevail in order to grow. And as we see temperatures increasing, we know that most regions in Europe are likely to see a heightened risk of timber decay. And in drier areas, you will have a lower risk, but of course it will be quite bad for humans. So this is the overall picture. We also see a precipitation increase in certain or in many areas, and we also see more rain instead of snow in areas where you used to have only snow the whole winter. Now you'll have periods of melting. So in areas where you were used to dry, cold winters, now it's not like that anymore. So the northern and the dry and the cold areas are the ones that see the most impact, as far as we can see from the climate changes in terms of biological damages. Maybe we might get some new species. I think the termites are on the march from Germany, but we still haven't got conditions for termites here. Knock on wood. So the project that I'm here because of is the Climate Move project, which means miljøovervåking, which is environmental monitoring. So it's an environmental monitoring of cultural heritage buildings to see if the climate changes have any consequences and what consequences they have. It's initiated by the project, by the Directorate of Cultural Heritage. It consists of 45 wooden and stone buildings around Norway. 35 of them are medieval. So we see the map here. We don't have that many in the northern part of Norway, and that's mainly because there aren't that many medieval buildings in the northern parts of Norway. But we have tried to spread them out a bit, and because of the way the buildings are placed in Norway, you have quite a lot of them down in the Telemark area. But we also have the west coast, and we have Trøndelag. So it's quite a big spread on these buildings. And it's, frankly, a fantastic project we were part of, because we get to see all these buildings. And we visit them every 5 years to see if there are changes. This far, there's a 10-year contract, and the project is intended to last for 30 to 50 years. So hopefully it will be a long enough project in order to look at the climate change. Because if you want to look at climate change, you have to look at climate periods, and that is at least 30 years. So yeah, so the people who started the project probably won't end it. But we have monitoring equipment in all the houses. We monitor the relative humidity, the wood moisture, and the temperature in 2 positions in all 45 buildings. We typically have quite poor network coverage because these buildings are placed all over. Typically no installed electricity, so we need a standalone measurement unit with high optional operational reliability. So we chose this outfit, and a big point here is that we also have wooden blocks. And those wooden blocks there are 4 of them that are pine sapwood, and they're from the same log. So all panels have small blocks from the same log. And there's a pine heartwood and an oak block. And we do tape lifts from these each 5 years to see if there are any mold fungi. So that's actually the part of the project that has given the most fruit the quickest, because the mold fungi started quicker than we expected. So we actually have seen, even after 1 year, because we visited the houses again after they started, and then the 1 year revision, and then this 5-year cycle starts. So even after 1 year, we saw some mold fungi in some of the buildings, which was a little surprising, actually. The work conditions tend to be quite interesting. This is a church loft, and you have to take your computer to the panel in order to download the data and so on. So I could have shown you as well a picture of underneath the floor in Urnes State Church, where there is this much space, and the floor is always kind of moist earth. So you have to do that last, because you have to lay on your stomach, and after that you're not fit for human interaction. So that was the project, and what we see from the project, because the project has 2 parts. There's one that is the buildings mainly, and the one is that one that focuses on the house longhorn beetle. So we have done a little bit of work on the house longhorn beetle, or Johan has. And we have, so far, we have no indications of spread to new locations. We possibly see some more activity in the already established damages. With the furniture beetle, we have a lot and lots of cases in the buildings. What happened there? So far we have no indication of any increased activity, but of course we haven't visited the houses. There are only a few houses that we haven't visited the second time after 5 years. So, and these insects work quite slowly, so we have to see this over a longer term. We haven't done any research in the project on ants, carpet ants, because there are no carpet ant damages in the houses in the project. What we see, according to decay fungi, is that we sometimes see new life in old damages. That's the main thing that concerns us at the moment. We are afraid that this will happen more. As of now, old decay damages in cultural heritage buildings, we see them as low risk, as long as they are dry, because you need water, right? So if the leak is mended, the foundation is repaired, and so on, a partial repair will be okay. So this is, for instance, a medieval loft where you had decayed floorboards, but of course the construction underneath was more decayed, more substantially decayed. And they changed the construction underneath, and they kept the floorboards because they were old. And this is dry rot, so it's high risk. But we see new weather conditions, we see new wetting, we see more extreme weather, which will give more happenings or occasions of wetting occurring in unexpected places. So we can see now some places new growth even after decades. This is a timber church, and those damages were really old and dry, and nobody thought they were any risk. But after 6 months of leaky gutters, you had new growth of the same fungus in the old damages. So that's a little chilling, really, because we have thought that in cultural heritage it's okay to remediate as little as possible, but maybe we will have to change the way we consider this type of damage. So we see also in many of these houses a lot of wood debris in the basements and in the crypts. And we also see in church crypts, of course, lots of wooden coffins. Some of these can be partly decayed, as you see in the corner of the right-hand corner of the lower picture there, you have a decayed coffin. And that used to be, we used to think that was, not optimal, but not such a crisis. But I think we need to consider now, because we see more and more wetting in these basements and crypts because of heavy rainfalls or maybe just increased relative humidity. So you have to consider maybe the storage of these coffins and removal of debris, which would be a good thing anyway, but maybe stress that a little bit more. And then we have the mold fungi, and this is maybe the most interesting and most, I think, the thing that really is connected to climate change most in what we have seen from this project. In several buildings, we have seen quite quick, as I said, after 1 year, establishment of this Aspergillus penicilloides, which is a mold that tolerates low humidities. It can grow quite low humidities. 70%, sometimes 68% have been seen in the labs. So they don't need that much moisture. And some buildings, especially stone churches, have had new, quite significant growth of the same kind, of the same fungus. And we know that that has been seen in Danish stone churches and in Swedish stone churches. So this is actually an emerging problem, and it's connected to summer condensation. So condensation in the summertime, humid air coming into quite chilly buildings, and then the condensation occurs and the fungi grow. So that's clearly a result of weather conditions. And as the weather conditions change, that is possibly a climate change phenomenon, this mold growth. So the ongoing work is how to discern these small changes. The project scope is monitoring, not research. We don't have money for the big research that needs to be done on this data, but we have large amounts of data collected. This is one of the churches that has been visited again after 5 years, and you see we have almost 6 years of data there, because it was visited first early in the year and then late in the year. And these data need to be analyzed. We have started a little tentatively with a sort of index approach, trying to see if thresholds are passed. But there is a need of research projects to really benefit from these data. But there is a lot of information to be found in this project. So that was it. I tried to be quick. I hope I was successful.
Thank you so much, Mari. Very, very interesting things. I can just make a small comment myself first. That is, in our practice with the vernacular buildings here, we have many that are like outhouses and out in the forest and too. So we've had turf roof, and we have in the early practice we put on steel roof when this construction was so damaged that we would change it too much and lose the source value. But the other ones that we are better conditions that we have put again turf roof and repaired them like 20 or 30 years ago or only 10 years ago, we see that they are growing very fast. There's a lot of damages. It's not a research project, but we can see that there are a lot more maintenance coming up. So it's interesting to talk also about this has kind of knowledge that you are documenting, and should it have an impact on the practice, how we actually restore and keep older buildings.
I think that's a discussion that should be started, because we see in many of the museums that they start to put up gutters on houses that haven't had gutters before, to manage the water, manage all the rainfall, because they see that their houses decay quicker than they used to. And we also see that the vegetation, I didn't mention that, but one of the things that we see a lot in the houses is that the vegetation is growing quite close to the houses, especially the wooden houses. We see quite a lot of vegetation growing just near to the house. You will see that in Jonas. There's a bush. We want a bush removed. But that, of course, keeps moisture in. When the rain has fallen and the bush is there to keep the sun from hitting the wall, then there will be more moisture for more time. And vegetation, of course, also is growing faster. So that is also, you have to come more often with your cutter to remove the raspberry bush or whatever. So that's also an issue. And there are not too much maintenance people, not too many maintenance people in the Norwegian cultural heritage. There should be many more of them.
Questions or comments?
I would like to ask, but how with the plant species on the roof in the climate changes? Does these plants have been changed?
I don't know. We haven't looked into that, but we see also, of course, the vegetation is growing quicker both on the ground and on the roofs. So we see in many of the turf-roofed houses, we see a lot of bushes growing on the
these
roofs.
Invasive plants.
Oh yeah, you're talking about
maybe also on the roof.
Yeah, I don't know. But we see. I don't know if that's a climate change thing or just a travel thing. But we have a lot of invasive plants, and they are growing quickly and spreading quickly, and they might also be a problem. But we haven't seen that directly in connection to these buildings as yet.
Yes, I could make a comment. I think your comment about the leakage, it could also be a climate change matter, not a maintenance matter, because the gutters must be changed, the bigger ones, to consume the increased rainfall. So I think that's an issue, and I think also it's an issue concerning conservation issue, and also authenticity. So all of a sudden we need new gutters, new sizes of the gutters, and so on. And in Sweden, there are now research made just about the same things and and they have concluded that the interval of maintenance is doubled, which means that the cost of maintenance is also doubled. And especially in outdoor museums where it's done by volunteers, it becomes a real problem how to maintain these houses due to climate change.
Absolutely. And sometimes they really have to sort of prioritize, and we maintain this house because that's more value than that house. So yeah, it's really a huge problem.
Then we take one more comment before next speaker.
If you change a rotten place, but not all, because you say, okay, I've done it and I will hold it dry. How dry? Where's the frontier?
The limit,
Yes, the limit. And because, okay, perhaps you have board outside or some plate outside, so the rain is not coming in the wood. So the wood dry is not going up, but the air, when it's over 70%.
The rule of thumb is that if the wood is below 20 weight percent, then there will not be decay. But that is in terms of new decay. So established decay, you can have new growth as low as 18%. But mainly, if you're below 20% most of the time, then you're okay. So, but the weight percent of 20 sort of corresponds with 85% relative humidity. So yeah, it has to be very moist in order for the relative humidity to be the only reason for decay. So mainly water intrusion is the thing with decay. You need water intrusion, mostly. That's
Say like this, how much is outside?
In the winter, the wood on the walls is usually 17 to 20. In the summer, in the air, on just the cladding, exposed to the weather. In the summer, it will be maybe 12 to 15, just like that. But yeah. So, and in the summer, you always have periods where you have drying. So it will always be a little drier in the summer. But if you have a summer with 100% all the time, of course, then you will have around maybe 20, 22.
We'll take one more question then, and then so.
I'm just wondering if not the ventilation is important, to take care of this, because it's the movement of the air will always do something to all kind of damage. And the last thing I was remembering when I was having the project with the new organ in the Bodø Dome Church, we could see that the climate, of course, the climate in Bodø is very dry. Most people think it's mostly, but it's very dry. So then we have to lower the temperature in order to get more humid into the church.
That's a very good way of saying it, because in many churches they put in humidifiers to increase the humidity around the organ in winter, because in Norway, of course, the weather is such that we have dry winters, so the organs dry up. And then they put in humidifiers, and then they get condensation in the roofs. So, good thing, change the temperature. And the ventilation is always important, because as wood dries, what has to happen is that it has to evaporate. The water has to go off the surface. And in order for the water to go off the surface, then the air outside of the wood has to be drier than the wood. So if the wood feeds the air with water and the air isn't removed, then it will just stay the same. It always goes into it always goes into balance with the air around it. Wood always wants to get into balance with the air around it, and moisture-wise. So the relative humidity above the wood is what governs the drying or the wetting of the wood, as long as you're not pouring water on it. So if you always remove the air and you always get drier air in, then the wood will continue drying. If you do not remove the air, then the wood will stop drying. It will have balance with the air directly above it. So the ventilation is crucial, always.
Thank you so much. We can continue during the lunch, I think so. Thank you.